welcome to Expro Unplugged. It's the series of podcasts from Expro where we look at the key issues in the energy industry from an Expro perspective. My name is Andrew Bradshaw, and today we're going to be talking about carbon capture, utilisation and storage, or CCUS as it's known. And I'm delighted to be joined by Expro's Manager of Sustainable Energy Solutions, James Yard. Before we dive into it, James, welcome first of all. Tell us a bit about your role with Expro and your expertise with CCUS.
Yeah, thanks Andrew. So as you mentioned, I'm the manager for Expro's Sustainable Energy Solutions team. We're a team within Expro that look at markets outside of our core oil and gas business. So we split this into two themes or two areas, one being cleaner energy and the other being future energies. So cleaner energy is the decarbonisation side of things, so that includes emissions management, CCUS and water management. And on the cleaner energy side, we have geothermal, hydrogen and mineral extraction.
Okay, and how important do you think CCUS is now?
I mean, it's a big question. Ultimately, the way I see it is that net zero isn't achievable without CCUS. So it's now being recognised by governments and industries alike that it's now an essential piece of the puzzle. If we put this into a different context, in terms of the emissions management hierarchy, there are a number of ways you can actually reduce emissions. Mm-hmm. The first one is by avoiding them altogether, which is the best way. The best emissions are the ones that don't reach the atmosphere. The second way is you can improve the efficiencies of the current practices. So that's kind of process-related things. The next thing you can do is replace, so switch to renewables, which of course we must do anyway. Mm-hmm. After that comes mitigation and then removal. And in the mitigation and removal bucket is where CCUS comes in. So when we think of that in terms of reality in industries, CCUS can be used in two ways. For carbon abatement, so that's stopping CO2 going into the atmosphere, and that could be done for power generation, or it could be done with heavy industries. There's the so-called hard-to-abate industrial sectors, which include cement, steel, petrochemicals and so forth. And between cement and steel alone, they account for about 15% of the global CO2 emissions globally. And it's very difficult to actually replace these processes and practices without using fossil fuels as the energy source, and without actually releasing CO2 after that. So for these types of industries to continue to the long term, CCUS is essential. So when you think of this in the context of what's happening globally and the global needs for, I guess, improved quality of life and societal progression, we're going to need cement, we're going to need steel, we're going to need plastics into the future. So in order to continue to produce these in a carbon-free way, we need CCS.
Okay, but how would you describe the current state of the CCUS industry then?
I think we're at a turning point. I think before now there was possibly a lack of understanding about, firstly, what CCUS was, and then why it's important. I think there's also been a view that it's a bit of a science experiment, but the reality is CO2 capture has been happening since the 1930s. That's been a patented process, and CO2 storage has been happening since the 1970s. So when you combine all of these technologies and processes and actually track record and experience throughout the world, we're actually in a pretty good position.
Right. But so what would the challenges be to CCUS? How do you perceive those? What are the main challenges that the industry faces?
Some of the big ones and some of the kind of chunky ones are policy and market uncertainty.
Right, okay.
So these are the things, well, in order for private investment to be drawn into the sector and actually get things off the ground and make it move quicker, we need private investment. And of course that's not going to happen unless you've got long-term political thinking, long-term policy and a stable economic environment. So that's the first thing. The second one that goes along with that is cost. At the moment, CCS, although proven, is costly. The cost is up here, and the cost of emitting is down here. So at the moment, there's a cost gap. So in most cases, certainly in Europe and the UK, it's cheaper for companies to actually emit CO2 than do CCS.
Right.
So there's kind of a cost gap,
yeah.
and that's going to be filled in the meantime by governments. Now, over time, of course, the cost needs to come down. I should do it this way, come down, and the price of carbon needs to go up. And at that inflection point, that's when a self-sustaining market will get going.
Right, okay. So how does Expro support the CCUS sector?
Yeah, so we're mainly focused on the storage space. The storage space aligns well with our core well services business.
Okay.
And when we look at this, we can look at it very much in the same way as an oil and gas development. So you start with the phase of resource assessment. Now, if that's a new saline aquifer, that's going to be an exploration and appraisal campaign, which is of course what Expro do as part of their core business. On the other side of things, if you're looking at using a depleted oil and gas field, then it's going to be a case of evaluating the legacy wells to check their integrity before you move on and then redevelop that field. Now, moving on from that, a large part of the work scopes we're seeing as a service company is actually in the P&A and kind of recompletion, refield development stage.
Yeah.
And then you move into the full field development, so that's either brownfield or greenfield, depending on the reservoir type initially. That moves then through to the life of field services, and of course then to P&A and decommissioning, and actually long-term monitoring beyond that.
Right, okay. But you talked about Expro's solutions to it. Going back to CCUS in general, how can we de-risk CCUS?
How can we de-risk CCUS? I think the understanding in the industry now is quite good.
Okay.
I think one of the key things that is going to be important moving forwards is actually educating the wider public and the general public.
Right.
Public perception and public buy-in is going to be key to success. Perhaps not so much in Europe, because that's kind of a North Sea basin, that's subsea, and it's not going to impact people's lives as much. But when you look at widening the storage basins and looking at other markets globally, such as the US, Japan, China, perhaps the Middle East, some of that storage is going to be onshore. Denmark, for example, are licensing onshore blocks for CO2 storage. And in that sense, you really do need the public to come on board to accept the concept before people start drilling holes in the back garden.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they will do that,
Yeah.
but that's just an example.
Yeah. So we've got to get the public on board with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how do you think technology, or is technology helping CCUS? And if so, give me an idea of kind of technological advances that are actually supporting CCUS development.
It's a really interesting topic, because the technology on paper is there, so we can capture CO2, we can dehydrate it, we can compress it, we can transport it, and we can store it. What technology is helping is driving the cost down. So the cost of CO2 capture is too high at the moment. In order for us to scale this market and it to become mainstream, that cost must come down.
Right, yeah.
And that's a technology play.
Yeah, okay. And how would you describe Expro's track record in CCUS development? I mean, have you got any examples of projects that Expro's been involved in?
Yeah, we've been quite lucky over the last 20 years. We've been involved in some of the major projects globally, actually. So some of the early pilots back in, I guess, the early 2000s, we were involved in terms of well intervention, integrity assessments, welfare management, fluid sampling. I guess closer to home and in the less distant future, we've been involved in a whole raft of appraisal testing activities up in Norway. So that started back in 2020 with Equinor for the big Northern Lights project. We provided integrating well testing services for that. That was it was a production test followed by an injection test. And we provided everything from the top side down to the bottom of the well. And that was a great project. Of course, that's coming online later this year.
Right, yeah.
And since then, and actually earlier this year in 2025, we've actually delivered 3 more appraisal testing programs in Norway alone. So 2 with Equinor, 1 for Harbour. So when you look at the North Sea as a storage hub for Europe, it's obviously a subsea market. The subsea market is where Expro is very strong. This is traditionally our homeland, the UK and Europe. And off the back of that, we've actually managed to win some work with BP for it's not BP, BP are a partner, the Northern Endurance Partnership, for 2 appraisal testing campaigns, or one campaign, 2 wells next year.
Okay.
So that's very exciting for us.
Absolutely, yeah. You talked a lot there about projects in Europe, James, but are there any projects outside of Europe that Expro have been involved in?
Yeah, so when you look at the big CCS hubs globally, you of course have the USA, which is the leading market for CCS. And over there we predominantly provide well construction services, and specifically our expertise in handling chrome tubulars, which of course is needed for the CCS market, because high chrome is needed to avoid the potential risk of corrosion. So handling these and not damaging them when running them is one of the key services that we actually offer in this space. And I guess if we look further afield, we've worked on projects in Japan, projects in Australia, and also touched on projects in the Middle East too.
Okay. What sets Expro apart from other service providers then?
It's a good question, and I'd like to think it's the same skill sets and offerings that we have for oil and gas. So first off, it's outstanding service quality. We're very customer focused and customer orientated. Second is safety. We have a safety culture that's embedded into our DNA. Champion safety is at the heart of everything we do. We have unique technologies spanning the well life cycle, and it's not just the unique technologies on their own, it's the combination of those technologies to bring together solutions for the market that sets us apart, so that solutions type thinking. And finally, we're nimble as a company. Yeah. We've got about 8,000 people worldwide, we operate in 60 countries, so we're big enough to make an impact, but small enough to be dynamic.
Excellent. Well, thanks, James. Thanks to you, and thanks to you for watching this latest podcast from Expro Unplugged. You can find all the other podcasts in this series on the Expro website, exprogroup.com. If you're going to be in Aberdeen for Offshore Europe this year between the 2nd and 5th of September, come along to the Expro stand in Hall 3. Thank you very much, and thanks for watching.